All right. Can everybody see us?
Liberland. Liberland.
So we come to you with no conspiracy theories. And we've traveled here from a pretty far place to be with all of you and with Vit. And we were here 7 years ago, not exactly here, but we organized this event at the 3rd anniversary, and it was a lot of fun. We had 100 people, so it's less than what we have here today. Brock wasn't able to make it back then, but I made sure that he shows up today. So I went all the way to Paris for the Blockchain Week to bring him personally here. And Brock is the one who told me about Liberland 8 years ago and said, you got to meet Vit, and he's got to be a speaker at all of our D10 events. I said, all right, let's do it. And I was in love with Vit from the first time I met him. My daughter and his son started playing together, and that's how we became a family. So here we are with Brock, and my first question is, how did you first hear about him and about Liberland as a concept?
Well, I spend a lot of my time and a lot of effort year-round related to Burning Man. The seasteading community, ephemeral, and the cryptocurrency worlds, and what was happening here, found its way through some of those circles. A lot of friends got involved early on, and so it was on my radar. Though this is the first time I've nearly set foot and had the pleasure, aside from the work that we did through D10E, to host events for Liberland at the Pierce School in Washington, D.C. that acts as unofficial, official, whatever, the Liberland Embassy. And so grateful to be here. As I always try to promise, I will make it at least once every 10 years.
So Brock, you are an advisor to prime ministers, presidents, governors of central banks in how many countries now?
Well, I've been meeting with governments for a long time, specifically as it related to things in crypto. Having started Tether really put me in that mix, and it helped that Steve Bannon worked full-time for me for 8 years in my 20s. Andrew Breitbart started his company in my office. And when Trump won the first time, I all of a sudden go, wow, I didn't realize I had this kind of access to government before. And so if given a lemon or an opportunity, a key, it's kind of your responsibility to use it. And then I ended up running for president of the United States of America in 2020.
Yeah, he spent $7 million of his own money to get on 14 ballots.
And so a lot of that infrastructure started the Independent National Convention, the Independent National Union, and funded a lot of that over the last 4 years, which was a lot of the infrastructure that RFK Jr. was able to utilize in his independent presidential bid. But I just ended up, there was not a plan. It just kind of, a lot of life is one step comes in front of another, and then when President Bukele of El Salvador went to create the Bitcoin law, I'd been talking to governments about implementing legislation for a long time. Most of it was inconsequential, nice signaling, part of the process of building. And when Bukele did that, I was like, oh, this is, wow, Bitcoin legal tender. This is real legislation. This is material and impactful and makes real change. His ambassador came over to my house in D.C. and ended up leading the first delegation into El Salvador with 36 of us, service providers, vendors, CEOs that could assist in the implementation of that law. That got done. My phone just started ringing from governments around the world saying, hey, can you help us, with innovation and whatnot? And that led to taking an appointment in the United Nations on behalf of OIJ, which is a permanent seat and a treaty between Portugal, Spain, the Dominican Republic, and every country in Central and South America, representing the youth. And we're the only representation in the UN representing youth, so by default, we effectively represent the youth of the world. Then I had to go meet all of our treatied nations, and just end up talking to everyone. I don't even know how many countries and
my
that
point
I'm
is
dealing with, but it's
that
many.
You
it's
have
60,
the
70,
responsibility.
80 nations that I talk to and converse with on a regular basis. And The Pierce School in Washington, D.C. is regularly filled with governments from all over the world.
What I was trying to get to with all these 40, 50 countries that I know you've met the presidents of, prime ministers, governors of central banks, is that when you have access to them and you're talking about so many different things, you have the ability to talk about, there you go. You have the ability to talk to them about Liberland and host them in D.C. at your beautiful home. So when you tell them about Liberland, what's their reaction?
Well, part of what I need, because I'm only as effective as I'm empowered, to be. And President Vitt and I had the opportunity to discuss this a bit last night, and probably better not all said on a stage based upon what we discussed, is, anytime you're trying to bring meaningful change to the world, you're going to be met with resistance. It is the nature of things. And those that are ultimately successful in bringing about change, are tenacious. Here we are 10 years later. If your heaven vision or having that vision, you quit in the process, it doesn't get done. And often, a little different than this story, and often those that are called to, pursue a mission are not always the ones that complete it, right? The second mouse often gets the cheese. And, but the pioneers that carried the flag, halfway up the mountain, were the pioneers that paved the way for those that often follow and complete the mission. And so, I think the areas where I can be of greatest service, to the vision that everyone here is gathered for is in probably having, smaller countries that I'll not mention, look at, recognition. I think part of the problem is when countries want to support, then the opposition sends their agents in quickly. So I think, loose lips sink ships, and, it's probably some of the quiet work that I can do that's unofficial in being a whisperer.
Great. So in coming here, a lot of people have been asking me, why am I doing this? Why am I getting involved? Why am I supporting this great idea? And I say, look, I don't need any country that's formed before I was born, without my authority, without my asking to recognize any plot of land. No, this is nobody's land. So what I tell them is there's 1,200, almost 1,200 citizens, 6,500 e-residence card holders. We recognize this. And the more people that will join the program, the more powerful we become. So when you talk to people and they say, well, Liberland is not officially recognized by any major country, why are you guys trying to get this plot of land? What is the best way to approach this?
Well, all big or great things have small beginnings.
Like Bitcoin.
What I look for are people that have grand, courageous, bold visions. And, most everything that we know today didn't exist. I mean, think about the world was empires not that long ago. Empires, well, they became nation states, the first one being the United States 250 years ago, and the entire world has been converted during this relatively short period. When we think of time, 250 years is long to a human life, but in the world of civilization, it's a pretty short period, and the entire sort of age of empires has converted into nation states. We're only now entering our 250-year anniversary of the first. And so what comes next? Because our lifespans are short, we don't think usually in 100-year or longer periods. And so I think it's a beautiful thing that, that people are still thinking about the idea of nation building, the idea of thinking even what might come after nation states as we think about cities, freedom states, as we think about now all of the qualified economic zones, charter cities. It's important. Network states, decentralized autonomous organizations. I like to surround myself with those that are, future thinking, those that are dreaming, and having visions of a future that don't exist yet. And that's why I'm here. And this is, exciting to me. There's not, how many opportunities are you going to have in your life to have been a contributor to the birthing of a nation? What an incredible thing to have participated in, and what it makes you think of. As you think of the building blocks, the building blocks of civilization, and to have an opportunity to contribute to something big and bold and brave.
Great. One more applause for that, 'cause that was great. So, Vid, I heard that you love meritocracy. And I've been talking about this for a long time, and I was a big supporter of Vivek Ramaswamy. I still am, now that he's running for governor of Ohio, his state that he grew up in. When we think of meritocracy, and I look at all these 700-some thousand people that say, I support Liberland, but they don't show up to this event, it makes me think about it twice. So I'm not trying to upset anyone who thinks they're a big enthusiast about this idea, but you got to step up and do something. So this is a message from me and from Brock to everybody out there who wants to advance this cause. You got to do it with your actions, whether it's getting an e-residency card, a citizenship, buying the token, contributing, bringing assets, talking to more leaders in the world. And if you don't do that, then you're going to remain a theorist, in my opinion, a person that has a vision but is not doing much about it. So I'm very bold about this because I like to do things versus talk about them. You first talk about them, you plan them, and then you execute them. So please reach out to everybody that's part of the committee, part of the different ministries. Obviously, Vid is always available. It's amazing to me how many thousands of messages he gets, and is always available to get back within hours to anything I asked or everything I recommend. So having said all that, that was my message for today, but we're here to have Brock, which is a very rare commodity because he's all over the world. Very hard to get him to come to an event, especially this far away from a major city. What is next for Liberland in 10 years from now?
Well, I mean, that depends on a number of factors, but largely depends on you. I mean, it's to echo part of what you've said. Great things are born and evolve into what they become because of the contributors. Many hands makes light work. I mean, it requires agents of change doing the work. President Vitt can only do so much. And it's numbers have to grow. Coalitions have to form, alliances have to be made, and fortunately, we're in a place where hopefully, we've got peace in the entire region soon, but where ideas like this can be pursued and where at least violence is not preventing it from happening. And as long as we don't have to worry about violence, you've got the opportunity to make something happen. And so that depends on you. But 10 years from now, hopefully you've got, a first settlement, the beginning of some industry, something that is allowing economic development to flourish, and with that, the continual building of the constitutional sort of foundations, that define that ethos, right, and its liberties.
And with that, I'd like to thank you for coming all the way here. I'm glad you allowed me. Oh, well, I just wanted to wrap up and thank him.
We can talk about a lot of things.
Yeah. Let's open it up.
I want to just add one thing. I'm always found David Icke to be, a truth seeker, and I enjoy his willingness to challenge conventional thinking, and to speak his mind. Most are unwilling to do that because of sometimes the consequences associated with doing such things. But I do want to add a couple of points because it is my area of expertise. We talk about things like what's going on in the U.S. administration and stable coins. I think it's worth talking about some of this stuff. Having put together Tether or USDT, which is now doing upwards of $100 trillion in transactional volumes, the U.S. dollar being the primary currency that the future economy settles in. It's changing the way that trade finance in the world works. It's bought $85 billion worth of U.S. treasuries, more than any company in the world. Made $14 billion last year, the most profitable company in the world per employee. One thing it never did is it never made a backroom deal. It's honored the principles and the ethos of the cryptocurrency industry. And so, and when you get this big, you know, the world gets complicated. It's affecting meaningful change in terms of global monetary system, similar to what Bitcoin has done in its own way. I, for one, am very happy to see the United States of America having a crypto president. I think it's a monumental shift, March 7th, the day the US government created a strategic Bitcoin reserve, has changed everything. We have permission as builders. For those of us that have been on the front lines, having to go to bed every night, worried that our doors could get kicked in, I mean, quite frankly, for some of us, myself specifically, we could have been killed for the things we were doing. You know, the fact that we now have a crypto president that wants the United States to be the crypto capital of the world and is giving us complete permission to build and to not have to fear for consequences, but we're being praised for our abilities to innovate and build things that transform the world. Just, I mean, it's the difference between night and day. You know, and it makes me so happy as someone that fought and put their life on the line to bring change like this to the world. I just want to, I want to acknowledge that, and I also, I know Elon, and I know a lot of the administration. I also want to applaud Elon for buying Twitter. I think that he put his life, his liberty, and all of his wealth on the line to do it for something that wasn't a great financial transaction, but I believe that he was truly doing this for the purposes of freedom of speech that was clearly being lost, and mass censorship across most platforms. And it's not a criticism of everyone's opinions, but I just want to make sure that as someone that has been close to these situations, you know, I'm very happy to see this stuff.
Great. So we have 3 minutes and 43 seconds. We'll take 3 questions. Anybody?
And by the way, and you see it with the burning of Tesla vehicles and the protests and the keying. Elon Musk lost half of his net worth as the wealthiest man in the world, making this sacrifice for all of us.
And he's still the wealthiest man.
But thank God, someone that recognizes with great power comes great responsibility.
Great. Any questions?
Questions from the room? Over here. Question from Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul Victoria. Thank you. I think you're being very brave in everything that you're doing and saying. I would like that you could clarify, like, you know, since years ago there has been all this. And I'm sorry that I want to be very direct and with all respect for you, but you know there are many rumors since many years ago about that the Tether gets emitted without the position of the dollars behind, but there are like more Tethers that are real dollars. Yeah, but there is that suspicion in the air. I just want if you can comment on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly when you're dealing with wealth creation, when businesses are, you know, I mean, what's Tether worth at $14 billion trailing earnings? I don't know, probably 100 to 500 billion today. When people are competing for some of the most valuable systems ever created, I'd say that you have clearly opposition, and meaning competing interests. And, you know, there are certainly a lot of media, as we know, is fake and paid for. But I think that the Bitfinex team, which ended up taking over the, call it public relations side of Tether, I relinquished the business after building and launching it to my partners on the Bitfinex side, the principals there. I think that they did a poor job in communications. I think they could have done a much better job of, you know, that having been their strength. They chose to say less, and there was certainly one questionable transaction, which is when Bitfinex had its bank account frozen and funds that they did a loan from Tether to Bitfinex. I think that should have been done with greater transparency in the spirit of the industry. And, that certainly gave, more opportunity for people to question. But I think a lot of shade was thrown at that business. I think we talked about Cantor Fitzgerald. And by the way, one of the things was, where's the audits? Where's the audits? If you worked in this industry, there was no auditor that would audit you. Because after the Enron scandal, after the Anderson Consulting scandal, the auditors, went under as a result of auditing these businesses. And because we were crypto, because we were this, they did go get a law firm, because it was hard to get an auditor to do it, but you can go pay a lawyer and say, will you look at our books and write a letter and say it's all there? And they did those things. But you couldn't get a big auditing firm to actually audit you. It just wasn't worth the risk to them to do that. Even if you paid them $5 million, it's like $5 million is not worth getting involved in a business that's so disruptive. And so there was a lot of questions there. But unlike a bank that might have fractional reserve lending of 10 or 100 to 1 on deposits, Tether has $85 billion in U.S. Treasuries out of the $145 billion that's there. The remainder of it is deployed into things like Bitcoin and other relatively low-risk investment products. But you're not talking about, there's not $145 billion there that they've then borrowed up to $1.5 trillion. The assets are there, and I don't think there's much of a question anymore. But, when you're a market leader, people are going to throw stones at you. And yes, there were some, I think, better decisions management could have made over the years, and certainly should have spent more of their budget on, hiring good PR and have had a strong communications team. I think they could have done a much better job of that, and it didn't help themselves. But like most great businesses, they have their strengths, their core competencies, and rarely, what makes someone successful are they great at all the things. And I think they were very weak in marketing, but they were strong in integrity. I believe. I think they were great in principle and never made any of the moral compromises that I think would create the issues that David brought up.
Question in the room? Over here.
So now Tether has been delisted from many European exchanges, and there are restrictions about using that. So how do you plan on, what would be your suggestion to?
Well, I don't run Tether, and haven't for a very, I guess technically never ran Tether. I rarely run things, but even though I put them together and build them usually. The EU is a complicated regulatory body, and usually is more onerous in its controls than, call it, the US. And so I'm not surprised, right, that the EU made life difficult for Tether. And Tether was at risk everywhere for what it had built and was doing. Tether has invested in another EU-based stablecoin. I think that long-term, what happens here is the European Union Central Bank is going to try and launch their own thing. I think that that's the wrong approach. I personally am a believer that, like Tether, like Circle, or like banks in the past used to issue currencies, I think in public-private partnership, letting financially regulated companies, run these things are more likely to be successful. Government bodies are usually not very good at building systems and implementing things, certainly in the areas of innovation. I think the European Union would be better off and more successful if it allowed public-private partnerships to pursue this. It would create things that are more competitive. Let's just, for example, let's say the European Union's network of central banks and its regulatory bodies implemented a CBDC. How much distribution do you think that's going to get into crypto wallets and exchanges all over the world, and are they equipped to even go make those deals, realistically? This is why I think the private sector is better equipped to win in these areas. Whether Tether ends up having a business in the future here, I don't personally care. I'm generally interested in seeing how innovation evolves. I often build competing businesses. I compete with myself. It's fun that way. because I care less about my own winning. I care about our collective winning. It's why I keep innovating and starting things over and over and over again. But I think the EU should care. I think that, and there's clearly an opportunity here, but we'll see if it ends up being pursued correctly and effectively, and as a result of that, successfully.
A last question from the room. So I had one little question. So we heard a little bit about the, from David Icke about sort of the dark side of AI, and I like to see both sides of the coin, and I heard you being quite optimistic last night. Maybe you guys have a quick word about that?
Yeah, so I built we incubated 19 AI companies in my house last year. Let's start with the technology is amoral. Technology is neither good or bad. Like electricity, it can be used to make an electric chair or turn these light bulbs on. Nuclear technologies can be made to create weapons of mass destruction or abundant low-cost power. Artificial intelligence at its core is made in our image. It is the byproduct of everything that we do. And so what are the long-term implications of AI? It is a reflection of us. If you want heaven on earth, it depends on you individually being your best possible self. If we're going to continue to be our worst possible selves and continue to teach these systems the worst of what we're capable of, that's when we're going to get the most likely dystopian future. If we continue to step up and recognize the responsibility that we have individually to, forgive ourselves, forgive others, and have compassion, and give people the freedom to, to grow and walk their path, I think that we could have an optimal outcome. Yes, robots and artificial intelligence are going to bring mass efficiency that is going to change the landscape of work, and that's not a bad thing. Many people work to survive or work to live. I'm blessed. I live to work because I'm living my purpose and my passion. And I think when you give people the freedom to be able to actually analyze their lives and heal their traumas, these things can happen. There's all sorts of wonderful outcomes that can come of this. But the responsibility is ultimately, again, on you. And all you can do is be the best possible you can be. And that's how we're going to get the best possible outcome, and it's certainly not living in fear.
Thank you. That was really inspiring.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mike.
Liberland.
All right. So, Mike Chivet.
We keep you for a minute. Of course, Brock, thank you for the substantial help that you provided with providing us the space in Washington, D.C., which is, of course, the belly of the beast. And it's very good to have a decent spot. I really appreciate it. I think you well deserve to get the Medal of Merit. You know what? I will give it to you like this, and we will pin it to you in Liberland.
All right.
But I just wanted to make sure that you actually get the reward. Because this is something that I think you truly deserve. It's now almost 2 years or 3 years since we are kind of based there in your space. It has helped us tremendously to extend our relations with the different U.S. representatives. Bogi is using the space to really bring the great people on board. So yes, they say we're virtual, but thanks to Brock, in a sense, we have actually better physical space in Washington, D.C., than most of European embassies, which is kind of exciting, right? So it's great to have him on board. And yes, on behalf of government and all the ministers, we would like to take the picture with you. And of course, you will finally get it physically in Liberland. But also, thank you very much for your great contributions and your thoughts on these very important topics. I would say I share much more opinions with you than I do share with David Icke, but I think it's very important to actually have some debate as well, and we can have a little bit of controversy.
Thank you for inspiring us. Right.
All right. Let's have a nice picture together if we can somehow line up here.
Probably here.
Yeah. Yeah, come here.
Shall we move this one back? No, come on. Or we leave it there.
Yes. The first lady must be here.
Hey, you're taller. You come this side.